From its huge commercial success making it Villeneuve's highest-grossing film, to forgetting Herbert's style in trying to make the film super realistic, here's why Denis Villeneuve's Dune might not actually be better than David Lynch's version. When the 2021 science fiction epic first came out, it was an instant box office hit, becoming Villeneuve's most commercially successful film to date. And why not? After all, this newest retelling of Frank Herbert's classic novel is a breath of fresh air after 2 failed attempts. But Denis, the guy nailed it. Even those who don't see the appeal in the original books had to give it to the French-Canadian maestro. Many people pointed out that Paul Atreides always felt like this distant, untouchable figure, and what was left of the plot felt like an AP history class droning on and on about politics and stuff. It was a total jargon overload, but Villeneuve and his team stripped away all this heavy baggage in their adaptation. And kudos to the casting director, because the project hit a smoking jackpot with Timothée Chalamet taking on the role of Paul. Suddenly, the cold and distant guy turned into a messiah with relatable moments. It's like you're right there with him, experiencing everything firsthand, and the struggles of his family on Arrakis. Finally, Dune became a human story you can connect with, thanks to Denis and his team. Still, the Atreides heir might shine as a character, but he's one cold dude. And guess what? The entire cast follows suit. Coldness galore, but they make it work. That's one thing Villeneuve definitely stayed true to from the novel. But even with all the award buzz it got, some critics and fans have taken one major issue with this version. The movie suffers from the classic 2-part film problem. The first part feels like an extended trailer for the real meat of the story, and some might argue that they could have crammed it all into one 3-hour flick. Let's be real, that's way too long, even with Timmy's on-screen charm. Then there's also the tragic case of its 1984 predecessor. Lynch had limited time and no final cut, and boy did it feel rushed toward the end. So breaking it up into 2 was the right call. Not to forget, even with just its first installment, this new Dune is not the easiest ride to follow. Did anyone understand every single bit of it? It's like Villeneuve swung the pendulum too far in the other direction, leaving fans to scratch their heads at times. Those confusing moments aside, the movie passes the overall vibe check. The man behind Incendies delivered once again, a visually stunning film that finally does justice to the source material. But you want to know which other film has breathtaking compositions, incredible cinematography, and jaw-dropping set and costume designs? It's David's adaptation of Dune. Bad news for Team Denis, but for all that's missing in Lynch's spin on the classic tale, his Arrakis has its own redeeming qualities. It isn't a stretch to say that the old Dune's been shelved as a bad film on a beloved series for years, to the point that no one's really been watching it unless you count the crazy fan club for the 77-year-old filmmaker. From critics to fans, everyone has given their 2 cents on why the 1984 version simply does not work. The director himself famously said, "It's not the film I wanted to make." But since the Chalamet take came out, David's good old project's been once again in the limelight. Though most comparisons range from critical to a full-on dunk, you've got to admit the old man's film isn't nearly as brooding as the new one. It's got a very different vibe. In terms of casting, his hand-picked actors fit the book's characters a whole lot better too. And the best part? No one's missing Hans Zimmer's migraine-inducing score. But the fact is that both directors know their craft, and it shows in the final product. They both go for these simple yet striking shapes on a grand scale. So the real question is, which approach serves the story better? See, Lynch's Dune checks all the boxes for a noir baroque film. The colors, details, and textures are a big part of the narrative. These design elements create strong contrast between the different groups in the story. Emperor Shaddam IV's world is all about gold. Even his throne room on Kaitain is a golden shell with these abstract carvings that could pass for an organ. The Emperor and his crew rock these polished uniforms that harken back to the pre-World War I European dynasties. Their dark-colored attire is similar to the dress of the Bene Gesserit and the Spacing Guild, but it's the textures that set them apart. The Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit has this richly embroidered gown, while the Spacing Guild rocks robes made from body bags. Talk about a fashion statement! The pre-war costumes are also seen in Caladan, the homeworld of Atreides, which teases the planet beyond the castle walls. As for the castle itself, it's a traditional European manor with this slight futuristic touch that goes really well with the fictional universe. The wildest city is Gedai Prime of House Harkonnen with a giant carving of a bloated human head spewing pollution. And down where people actually live, it's all oil, steam, and slime. It's one crazy industrial mess if you ask me. In stark contrast, there is the dry orange desert world of Arrakis. From light robes and black steel suits to beautiful tiled mosaics and handmade ceremonial cloaks, this box office bomb does a solid job at bringing the unique planets to life. But when it comes to Villeneuve's Dune, you can't call it Baroque in any way. It's not that the film lacks intricate details, but they're applied more selectively. The most striking aspect of the film is not the details or textures, but the shapes and sizes. Denis is all about the silhouettes and plays around a lot with light to define the spaceships, buildings, and characters. Caladan and Arrakis have more natural colors, while Getty Prime goes for a more theatrical feel. The overall color palette throughout the film is subdued and not as vibrant as some recent blockbusters, but the Arrival director's already versed in the sci-fi genre, so he's got these elements that are super easy to follow, despite his Dune being a hard film. Not to mention, the lack of excessive textures and fancy decorations makes the main stuff stand out even more. That said, after spending a couple of hours with the 1984 adaptation, Villeneuve's big hit looks very dull, and that's no accident. See, together with his production designer, Patrice Vermette, the two were going for a grounded and believable look, so they drew inspiration from Earth's past. But here's the thing. The final result ends up looking very modern. Sure, dull, gritty, and minimal is what's in vogue, but some of the houses from the film could easily fit the latest edition of House and Garden. This doesn't exactly make the architecture in Denis' universe out of place, but it also doesn't scream strange mythical universe, a vibe that Lynch nailed 100%. Even the costumes in the new Dune look more like high-end fashion showpieces than something that belongs to a deeply rooted civilization. While Villeneuve made the characters feel so real, the same can't be said about their universe. It's not a deal breaker, and the film's hype is deserved. See, the book is a cold story with cold characters to begin with, but Lynch's version of Dune got some sense of realism that the new one missed. And it's not the first time that Denis is facing this criticism. Remember how Blade Runner 2049 had a similar reception? People said that the retelling of the dystopian world wasn't too realistic in its design. According to the filmmaker, he really wanted to do things, and I quote, by the book. The thing is, there's no doubt that the guy's a visual genius, but his signature style is too minimalist, and sci-fi fans have a thing for wild imagination. On its own, his Dune is all about that ambition and elegance. Even if the rumbling Dolby sound and those vast desert landscapes at times give more Lawrence of Arabia than a thrilling sci-fi feel. Ironically, his focus on translating the book for the big screen didn't capture Herbert's spirit at all, unlike David. And that's what makes the original Dune so interesting. It's the love child of Frank's mind-bending world and Lynch's twisted dreamscapes. Yes, the Eraserhead director hardly called the shots on this one. Plus, the movie's production was such a mess that the renowned filmmaker didn't even want his name on the credits. Look here, Lynch might still be heartbroken over the only flop in his career, but his adaptation is more experimental than anything else. The campy movie storytelling, with those weird Freudian symbols, is every science fiction fan's nightmare. Despite all that went wrong in its filming, the original gives the 2021 hit some real competition. What's more, heated debates end up with scene-to-scene comparison between the two Dunes. One popularly rehashed scene is Paul's initial trial with the pain box. In the first film, they give us these intense, fiery cutaways to stress what the character is going through. But Villeneuve's version uses modern effects, so the training sequence with the protective energy field looks way cooler. Now look here, it's not David's fault that the hand-drawn effects from 1984 seem a bit silly now. And if you ask die-hard Lynchians, that surrealism is the perfect fit for the sands of Arrakis. And there you have it, folks. From forgetting Herbert's style and trying to make the film super realistic, to its huge commercial success, making it Villeneuve's highest-grossing film, that's why Denis Villeneuve's Dune might not actually be better than David Lynch's version.